In a few hours, Kentucky's Attorney General will give recordings of the Breonna Taylor grand jury hearing to a judge. Daniel Cameron now says he never recommended murder charges in the case. The grand jury handed down no charges for Taylor's death, and one of the jurors is asking for permission to explain why. We're now learning more about that request. Adriana Diaz is in Louisville. Adriana, when will the public be able to hear these recordings?
Well, Anthony, the judge ordered that the recordings be filed in court by noon today. The state attorney general said yesterday that most of the recordings will be made public, but it's unclear how or when that'll happen once the court has them. And the grand juror who's petitioning the court to speak publicly says they want to talk about what might not be in those recordings, possible charges or defendants not presented.
Breonna Taylor! Breonna Taylor!
Protesters and Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, have not stopped demanding justice, especially after Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron admitted he never recommended murder charges for Taylor's death.
Ultimately, our judgment is that the charge that we could prove at trial beyond a reasonable doubt was for wanton endangerment against Mr. Hankinson.
Former Detective Brett Hankinson faces 3 counts of wanton endangerment for shots fired into a neighbor's apartment. He has pleaded not guilty. In an exclusive interview with WDRB-TV, Cameron said that while some feel justice was not served, he says the facts won out.
I cannot fashion the facts in such a way to meet a narrative that in many ways had already been put out there before the facts had been put out there.
We continue to ask for full transparency.
Taylor's family attorney, Ben Crump, says the upcoming release of the grand jury recordings is one small step toward justice.
We at least want to know that it's equal justice under the law for Black people as victims, not only when Black people are accused of crimes.
The other 2 officers who fired shots at Taylor, including the bullet that killed her, Miles Cosgrove and Jonathan Mattingly, were not indicted on any charges. The attorney for the anonymous juror who wants to speak out says his client felt compelled to take action after how Cameron presented the grand jury findings last week.
Is there a concern that if these filings are released, it could set a precedent for future grand juries where grand jurors won't be able to trust that their proceedings remain private as they are meant to?
It would be more dangerous to set a precedent to not disclose everything to the public that you're allowed to.
Louisville's incoming interim police chief, Yvette Gentry, the first woman in that role, says one of her first orders of business is regaining trust.
I think you have to acknowledge that some of the reasons why they don't trust it is because some of the basic information has been skewed, and I understand what it feels like to be angry and neutralized and upset, both from what the protesters are feeling and the officers as well.
The grand juror is asking for more than just the recordings to be released. They want all transcripts and reports to be made public as well. Now, we don't know when a judge might rule on the grand juror's request, but their attorney says he's hopeful that could happen within a couple weeks. Tony?
All right, Adriana, thank you very much. This is kind of a high-stakes release for Attorney General Cameron because President Trump has called him a star. He's a Mitch McConnell protege. His political career could be on the line here in some ways.
Yeah, but the fact that this grand juror said, listen, I want to speak. I want the public to know exactly what we saw or maybe what we didn't see is very, very important.
Yeah, and the argument for transparency is a very compelling one.
Yeah, I see it as a positive direction in getting answers in this case.
Oh, I agree.
Very exciting.